Shunned for being poor, an elderly woman stuns everyone by buying millions in jewels. Some moments stay with you forever. This was one of them. It was a crisp winter afternoon, and I had stepped into an upscale jewelry store in the heart of downtown. The kind of store that catered to the wealthy, the elite, the people who never checked price tags because money was never a concern. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume, and soft classical music played in the background, making the place feel even more grand. Everywhere I looked, there were glass cases filled with glittering diamonds, gold, emeralds, and sapphires. Each piece was more extravagant than the last. I wasn't there to buy anything, just browsing. But then she walked in. An elderly woman, small and slightly hunched, wrapped in a long coat that had clearly seen better days. It wasn't ragged, but it was old. Well-worn, faded at the seams, and fraying at the cuffs. Her scarf was an off-white color, slightly discolored with age, and her shoes, though polished, had visible scuff marks. But the most telling part of her appearance was her hands, rough, wrinkled, and weathered from years of hard work. The moment she entered, I felt a shift in the air. The salespeople, dressed in sharp black suits and polished shoes, exchanged glances. Their expressions were subtle but clear. They didn't believe she belonged there. A tall woman behind the counter raised an eyebrow. Another young man, probably new, let out a quiet sigh, as if already expecting that this woman was not the type of customer who would make a purchase. I could tell what they were thinking. She was an old woman, possibly poor, possibly just wandering in to look around and waste their time. She didn't belong in a store like this. Despite the silent judgment, she walked forward with quiet dignity, scanning the rows of dazzling jewelry as though she were searching for something. She moved slowly, carefully, as if each piece held a secret. Then, after a few moments, she stopped in front of one particular case. It was a necklace, but not just any necklace. This one was a masterpiece. A stunning diamond piece, elegant yet bold, the kind of necklace that only the richest of the rich could afford. The diamonds shimmered under the store's bright lighting, catching every ray of light like tiny stars trapped in metal. She stared at it for a long time. I watched as one of the salesmen hesitated before approaching her. He was young, maybe in his early 20s, and I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He had been trained to be polite, but even so, I could tell he was unsure how to handle this situation. Finally, after an awkward pause, he cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carefully measured, "this section has some of our most exclusive pieces. If you'd like, I can show you something more affordable." His words were gentle, but the message was clear. She didn't react right away. Instead, she simply pointed at the necklace in the case. "I want to see that one," she said softly. The young salesman hesitated. He glanced over his shoulder at his manager, who was standing near the back, watching the interaction. The manager gave a subtle shake of his head, signaling that this woman was not a priority. Still, the salesman reluctantly reached into the case, pulled out the necklace, and carefully handed it to her. She held it delicately, running her fingers over the diamonds, her expression unreadable. "This one is beautiful," she murmured, almost to herself. Across the store, customers began to take notice. A well-dressed woman in a fur coat whispered something to her husband, a small smirk on her lips. A businessman in an expensive suit glanced at the elderly woman, then at the sales clerk, as if expecting him to dismiss her. I could see the assumptions forming in their minds. She was wasting everyone's time. She would soon realize the price was too high, apologize for the mistake, and quietly leave. The salesman cleared his throat again. "Ma'am, this necklace is quite expensive." She looked up at him. "How much?" He hesitated before answering. $1.5 million. The room went silent. I could almost hear the collective breath of the store holding steady, waiting for her response. The fur-coated woman let out a small laugh, shaking her head slightly. Another shopper smirked, nudging his companion. A few of the salespeople exchanged knowing glances, already prepared for the moment this elderly woman would realize she was out of her depth. And then, she reached into her coat and pulled out a small, old leather checkbook. "I'll take it," she said simply. The young salesman blinked. "Excuse me?" she repeated with the same calm tone. "I'll take it. And I'd like to see the matching bracelet, if you don't mind." For a moment, nobody moved. The disbelief in the store was palpable. The manager, who had up until now ignored her, suddenly straightened up, his face shifting from disinterest to something resembling panic. He hurried forward, his voice dripping with sudden enthusiasm. "Ma'am, allow me to personally assist you." But the elderly woman didn't even look at him. She turned back to the young salesman, the same one who had doubted her. "No need," she said. "This young man will help me." The salesman, now looking both embarrassed and nervous, nodded quickly and retrieved the matching bracelet. As she wrote the check, his hands trembled slightly. Then, after a moment of hesitation, he finally asked, "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what do you do?" She smiled, tucking her checkbook back into her coat. "I worked as a maid for 50 years, she said simply. "I saved every penny I could. My late husband always promised to buy me something beautiful, but he passed before he could. So today, I'm buying it for myself." The silence that followed was different this time. Gone was the judgment, the skepticism. Instead, there was respect. The woman in the fur coat looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. The businessman who had smirked earlier cleared his throat and avoided eye contact. The young salesman, who had doubted her at first, now looked at her with something close to admiration. She took her bag, nodded politely, and walked out, disappearing into the bustling street outside. But the memory of what had happened stayed with me. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Wealth isn't about appearance. It isn't about the clothes you wear or the shoes on your feet. Some of the richest souls come wrapped in the humblest packages. Hey everyone, if this story moved you, if it made you think, or if it reminded you why we need to keep having these conversations, please take a moment to like this video. It really helps spread awareness. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced something like this? Let's talk about it. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're here to share real, powerful stories that need to be heard. Lastly, share this with your friends and family. The more people who see this, the more we can bring awareness and change. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey. Let's keep pushing forward, together.